Welcome to another edition of the Insider Mailbag. I'm Jared Johnson, and this week, I'm going to be honest, the questions aren't all that optimistic coming off Texas Tech's 35-33 win over Houston Baptist. Now, the good news is Tech did win that game, of course. The bad news is honestly, they were lucky to do so. They were outplayed for a lot of that game against an FCS school. So, as one might imagine, a lot of the questions were pretty negative this week, which is fine. You know, I try and call it like I see it. I mean, when it's positive, man, nobody's beating the Red Raider drum harder than I am. I mean, I want to promote the positive things, but then when things go wrong, when Tech doesn't perform well, such as the case last week in the opener against Houston Baptist, I mean, we got to recognize it for what it is, and that's what I believe a lot of these questions are doing. Some of them that went overboard, I'm gonna just kind of stay away from. But we have plenty of very good questions from subscribers at Inside the Red Raiders. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, the first one comes from Tall Cool, who asks, and I have to answer this because he might be being sincere. You know, this might not be hyperbolic. He says, "Is there any chance Tech's defense can hold a conference opponent under 50 points?" Well, yes, I think that's definitely going to be the case. Now, the first test is against Texas. Sam Ellinger, very tough quarterback. They're loaded really at most of the positions, and they're going to come in and try and knock Tech out early. And I think they're going to try to stay on it, get those points with the voters. You know, they want to really impress them so they can move up the polls. But I think Tech's going to have a better showing than something. I do think Texas is going to score in the 40s. So right off the bat, I think they'll hold an opponent under 50. But I think Texas is going to put up some points and yards. They're going to have success offensively, obviously. But I do like what I saw from Tech's front seven. The secondary has to come on in a big way. They gave up 500 and I can't remember now. And it was a really disappointing performance by the secondary. So they have to step up, man. Big challenge. But I think 2 weeks to prepare. Everybody telling them how terrible they are. It's a heck of a motivator. I think we're going to see a much better performance from the Red Raider secondary. We better, or they're not going to hold Texas under 50. That's for sure. All right, Mr. Clicks wants to know if I think Keith Patterson, the defensive coordinator, makes it through the season. If next week is his last, if Tech gets crushed again, especially. I think the thing that has people so frustrated is, so you drop 8 in coverage against HBU, and look, Bailey Zappe's a good quarterback, but I mean, come on. You face good quarterbacks in the Big 12, and you're going to face another good one in the next game. So I think what has people so frustrated is that if you drop 8, how do you let people consistently get behind you, specifically FCS caliber receivers? So I get the frustration. I actually like Keith Patterson. I get why people don't. What I don't like, though, is how the team struggled to get lined up. That's just, I'm so sick of seeing it. We saw that with David Gibbs' defense too, specifically in the secondary. And I know these guys, there's a lot of new faces back there on the defense period. They didn't get to practice a lot. I get all of it. But, come on, the basic stuff. You should be able to get your team lined up on a consistent basis. It should be like how I feel about kickoffs out of bounds. Like, that should only happen like a couple of times a season, really, where you're just like so blatant, like, man, they're not even lined up at all. That happened multiple times in the opener, so that has to improve. That's the first step. You gotta know what you're doing before you could actually accomplish your task. You gotta at least know what's going on. So we'll see if they get back on the same page. Now, to answer your question directly, it's 2020, so I don't want to say no. I would like to see the coordinators and the coach stay intact for a whole nother year, especially with Corona, how disrupted the season's been. I'd like to see the gang stay together again and see if nothing else, just staying together for that long, there's some dividends, gained by that. So, but they can't have too many performances like they did against HBU. That was inexcusable. That truly was. And I don't use that word a lot, but that was like, there's no defending that, really, the way they played against that opponent. So he's going to have to come on. They're going to have to do things differently and improve. Or you may very well be right, Mr. Clicks. I believe you think he's going to be gone. There's pressure on him, that's for sure. Murdo Coalition asks, he said, actually, he knows this may sound crazy, but could it be that Patterson was holding back and playing a more vanilla scheme out of a lack of respect for the opponent, plus not wanting to give away too much info for Texas? He says, or as most on here suspect, is it merely a case of poor scheme, poor coaching, and poor execution of that bad scheme? Yeah, I think it's a combination. As most things, I think it's a combination of all those things. The whole vanilla scheme, I mean, here's where I'll say is I don't think he blitzed as much as he will against Texas. I don't think he took as many risks. What's interesting is that they didn't always get home. They did force some incompletions, but after they played very vanilla at first, and then after Bowman threw that interception and gave HBU the ball, I think either just inside Tex territory or right around midfield. It's a great field position. Patterson blitzed, and I think if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator in that situation again, I think more times than not Patterson's going to blitz. So they'll have something dialed up for that, or I would. But I did notice that, and it was successful. They were able, in that case, they were able to put pressure on Zappe and get the result they wanted eventually. So I think, once again, circle back and answer your question. I do think that they held back some of the blitzing schemes, but on the other hand, there were some poor. I don't understand some of the man schemes. I really feel like the personnel did not know the scheme. I think that was the main problem. I feel like they weren't properly prepared. And I'm not going to make excuses. They should have been prepared. So I expect this team to be way more prepared for Texas than it was for HBU for a number of factors. So I think it was a combination of all those things, all those factors. Red Raiders wants to know, are we likely to see MacGyver or another quarterback against Texas, especially if it gets out of hand early? So I'm assuming you mean if it gets out of hand in Texas's favor, right? Just kidding. But no, Columbia's number 2 on the depth chart. It's my understanding. He took the number 2 snaps and warm-ups. Henry Columbia's the transfer who came in from Utah State. He's a dual threat guy. So I believe he's overtaken MacGyver for the number 2 spot. Now, we'll see what happens in warm-ups against Texas. But everything I've heard and what I've seen is Columbia's number 2. So if, for whatever reason, Bowman is either yanked or he can't go or whatever, I think Columbia's the next guy up. So I like Columbia. He's familiar with the system. David Yost obviously likes him because he's recruited him to his program twice. David Yost, offensive coordinator. And I think they can do some things. Now, how ready he is to play against Texas, I don't know. And maybe we'll find out. But we'll have to see. I don't know what Columbia's ceiling is. I haven't seen enough of him to know that. But it'll be interesting if he does get to play to see how he does, because I think his legs could add another dimension that I'm not sure. Maybe MacGyver can bring it, or maybe, I don't know. He's had a couple injuries to his wheels. So, but I know Columbia can. With talking with Henry before he actually officially joined the program after he committed to Tech, that's a dimension that he talked about, that he wants to bring to the offense, and that he knows that David Yost covets, and it'll help a lot with a lot of those read options they run, any RPO action they do. It'll at least hold. For me, I just want to, at the very least, for them to be able to hold the defensive end for 1 or 2 counts. Even just that 1 count hesitation will allow the running back to get up in the hole. So I don't think you get that with Bowman, because they know he's not going to pull it. So that's the extra dimension I think is very advantageous for this offense. But maybe Bowman will play lights out and stay healthy, and we won't get an answer to that question this week even. Speaking of that, geez, I forgot about this question. Midnight 54 says, what are the odds Bowman will be standing upright after the UT game? I'm not going to... I understand the question. I really do. I get it. With his injury history and everything, and the fact that, it is Texas. But I'm going to be optimistic, and I can't imagine saying, I think he's going to get knocked out of this game. I'm not predicting a boxing match or MMA. So I'm going to predict that Bowman stays healthy in this game. As far as upright, I think he's going to get knocked down some, but I think, he won't be. I don't think he's going to have a collapsed lung or anything like that. Knock on wood. Joe Leaphorn asks, He says he is under the impression that Kansas State and Iowa State have managed to hold onto fan support through thick and thin by making sure the game day experience is a good one. He says, win or lose, people can count on a quality game day experience. He says, here's his two-part question. Number one, will it be easier to correct flaws in the Jones, during the game, have that game day experience that have seen fans not returning after the half or leaving early in droves, no matter the score, than to put a competitive team on the field? Well, I don't know. I'll tell you, I don't know if it's just Texas Tech. I've been to other games, but I wasn't really paying attention to the game day atmosphere like I did about Tech, because I went to Tech, and I remember what it was like as a student, how much fun it was going to a game. So it's a completely different perspective from that regard. But like, for example, when I have gone to games as a fan, like I went to the Tennessee-Florida game, which is probably a bad example. But I mean, the game day atmospheres couldn't have been, it was almost like a Texas high school football game to a junior high game. I mean, the atmosphere was so much better. I mean, the energy that was charged, all the tailgating was amazing. Just the whole atmosphere was great. So it was very different. It was rowdy, and what I remember as a kid in the late 90s, early aughts, about when I go into Tech games, is how rowdy it was. To me, the best sports crowds have a hint of fear, like we don't know what this crowd's going to do, but actually, obviously, nothing ever bad or any kind of violence ever breaks out. To me, those are the best crowds. Just that mob feel, it's an electricity. Any sports fan or any kind of event, even definitely music events are like that too, where you just feel that extra electricity in the air. And I haven't felt that at Tech in a long time. And this leads me to my next question of ultimately, if I can just hammer the administrators, and maybe that's the case. Maybe some decisions that have been made have been in poor judgment in terms of game day experience, in terms of having a fun experience. I can't speak to that as much as probably some of you fans out there, honestly, because I have a radio show, 2 hours before, and I'm hustling over the press box, so I don't really get to see it as much as I used to. But your second question was, can collapsing, dwindling fan support be restored without putting a competitive product on the field? If so, exactly how? Well, I think the thing is, it's not just that, okay, this fan base was all about going to the game when Tech was good, and now they're not. It's been a sustained amount of losing for a decade. I mean, basically, this team hasn't really been competitive since I guess 2009, where you were like a national audience was like, okay, this team could challenge for the Big 12 and win a pretty good bowl game, beat some good teams from around the country. It's been a while. The defense has been so bad. I mean, even when you had Mahomes would have to score almost every possession to win a game. So, that doesn't really, what's funny is that doesn't really jive with the West Texan mentality. I mean, you're talking about tough, blue collar, you go to work every day, get the job done, persevere. That's how I feel about West Texans, and that's not the type of team you have. You've had a finesse team, that worked under Mike Leach. But the best Mike Leach teams, in my opinion, had very physical offensive lines with at least one or two defensive players that had the opposing team's head on a swivel. Of course, Dwayne Slay is the biggest, the best example. But there are other examples where, the opposing offenses were scared. And I don't really remember that. Jordan Brooks was good, but the secondary was so bad last year. So that's my whole point is that's really hard to continue to root for and be really excited about. I mean, right now the fan base is so battered, and I see it on the message board and it's other Raiders, and I hate it for the fans as much as anybody. People say, "Oh, I feel bad you have to cover Texas Tech football." Like, no, I mean, I feel bad for the fans. I want them to be able to enjoy, a really big season where the team's relevant. A team they can get behind, because we've seen it time and time again. We saw it with football, in the Leach era. We're seeing it right now in the golden era of both basketball and baseball. With of course Coach Beard and Coach Tadlock and those programs. Red Raider Nation really gets behind a fan base. Really gets behind its teams. But not when come on. Even the most loyal fan base. So I have a hard time standing behind, really supporting a team that's been so bad for so long. So I'm actually amazed at how much. I mean, I see our numbers on the website on Inside the Red Raiders, and I'm actually. I mean, I know my staff does a great job. So I get it, but I'm surprised with the level of support given the results of the past several years. So it's pretty impressive, really. This fan base it never ceases to amaze me just how loyal Red Raider fans are. So to answer your question, I think they need to win. They need to win again. And then, if you win it, they'll come. They'll show up, and not only will they show up, but they'll stay through the second half to watch, the good teams win. And then I think some of it's just the sport being so long and the way it is now. A basketball game is 2 hours, baseball game's 3 hours, football game's 4.5 hours. That's a long time. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think if they get it turned around, then have all three of the major sports really rolling. That would be a sight to behold in Raiderland here. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their great questions. Thank you for watching, and until next time.